Hey, fellow tennis nerds. I'm here with my buddy Amos. He's also an osteopath and he arranges my weak body into parts where it actually works on the tennis court so I avoid injury. He's been helping me with my tennis, elbow, previous problems, forearm stiffness. Now it's my shoulder. And yeah, I'm feeling pretty great now playing a lot and enjoying it. And he's a very skilled guy. He knows a lot about these types of injuries. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And very happy to have you here.
Pleasure.
Cool. So, how long have you been doing this?
Approximately 13 years now.
13 years.
13
Well,
years.
You've been working in different places here in Malta. You have a wide variety of clients. What's the most common issues they have?
Most common would be back pain of some sort, whether that's lower, middle, or upper back problems, shoulders, necks.
From sports or from sitting too much?
Most have a sedentary lifestyle, so very inactive.
Yeah.
It's not really athletes coming with different problems, but yeah, most are office based.
Okay. So just sitting down, not doing much, maybe having a bad diet, probably, I guess.
Yes, contributing definitely a bad diet. Some of their desks might not be ergonomically assessed, especially coming from a time where many people spent a significant amount of time at home with the COVID situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And of course, you make do when you're at home with whatever you've got, table, chairs, and so it wasn't the best. Sometimes even, working from the bed itself.
People are in the sofa and then their kids are coming and I've been on these Zoom calls when like there's one kid running the other way and one kid running and you're in the middle of a meeting and it's kind of a struggle, right?
Yeah.
To be in a good position.
Very much so.
I'm coming from a sports background. What do you see? Do you have a lot of people like playing tennis coming to you here in Malta?
Yes. So there's been a surge of people taking up sporting activities. And of course, with Malta having a good weather, then outdoor sports are preferred, such as tennis. So there is a rise, definitely. So I have a few that come for tennis and other sports, athletics, football, etc.
That's good. So, and the most common among athletes is, tennis is very specific around the tennis elbow, but I guess from other sports you see kind of what are the typical problems you see?
Of course, it's, as you said, it's dependent upon the sport that presents. But usually, if we're dealing with kind of football, we're talking about knees, ankles, into the back, sometimes neck, but mostly it's lower body issues. Again, tennis, you said, around the wrist, arms, people come forth. With athletics, it's mostly the hamstrings, back issues where a lot of force is put through those areas.
But what is really tennis elbow? Like people feel a certain pain somewhere in this region, but what is it really?
So really it's inflammation. Inflammation of a certain part of the arm, the outside arm. So its full anatomical name is lateral epicondylitis. That's its proper scientific name. Really you get a lot of inflammation around that area, and then sometimes it can be just pain, sometimes it can be when you're stretching, but it's really a repetitive strain.
Overuse kind of
exactly,
thing.
overuse in the lateral aspect of the arm.
Something we talk about a lot, us gearheads, is that you're playing with a very stiff string, you're playing with a stiff racket, like there's a lot of vibrations coming down to starting in the hand, like that's the thing. So there many rackets are kind of hollow in the handle, although they're trying to kind of add some dampening rubber and stuff in the handle so that you actually stop some of the vibrations already in the handle of the racket. But then they go to the arm here, and what happens then? Like, okay, they travel up the elbow, but let's say you're contacting the ball late, for example. Where is the problem in that, and why does that affect you negatively compared to people that maybe have better technique, where they actually contact the ball a little bit more through or in front?
Again, it's related to really the physics of a sport. And forces always like to travel in a straight line. When you hit the ball late, you're creating an angle, and your body has to compensate for that angle. And if you hit it too late, again, you have to compensate for the the angle.
For the force.
Yes, exactly. So ideally, you want to hit the ball perpendicular to the racket. That would mean that the force travels directly from the strings through the ball and in the direction that you want it to go. Anything around that, where you have mishitting or hitting it too early, too late, or hitting the ball not in the center of the racket, then that creates all types of different problems: torque, torsion, rotation, and then that then impacts the wrist and then into the arm.
Yeah, so having a kind of a clean technique or a stroke where you kind of go through the ball is generally preferred. I mean, you play squash on a pretty high level yourself. Like, what do you see are the kind of different issues between squash and tennis? And you had wrist problems yourself. Like, where does that kind of, is that the most common problem for squash players?
Squash players, actually, most problems occur around the knees. So knees and hips. I've seen many of my fellow squash players who eventually stop the game because of knee, hips, lower back, surgeries, etc. My particular problem was a wrist problem. I overstretched. It was poor technique, which we're talking about here, and it just was very bad, and I strained my wrist.
So you bent it in some way during the contact.
Yes,
kind
exactly.
Of, so overuse, let's say you're hitting the ball over and over again, whether it's squash, tennis, or whatever, that kind of brings, inflammation, growing inflammation in a problem, and then you can have like an acute, I guess, an injury at some point, because it's like a build-up thing,
exactly.
right?
Yes. So often you get repetitive warning signs in the body, and that might be inflammation or tension in the body. And if you ignore those warning signs, unfortunately, often, your body eventually snaps.
So you should listen to your pain. That's generally the advice. Yeah, take it seriously.
Yep.
So let's say you have a problem, you're feeling stiffness or pain when you're playing tennis. What should you do after that? Like, are you going to see this as something that will go away? Should you seek treatment, or what should be your kind of plan?
Definitely to seek some type of advice, medical advice, which goes beyond the confines of Wikipedia. Also, important to be preemptive. So warm up before you play the sport, and also warm down. So these are things that can be done to try and mitigate something arising in the first place.
And is it, if let's say you're starting to feel a niggle, and if you start to take action, probably you can kind of stop it or at least dampen it. But let's say you have already a problem. How long does it take for it to go away? And what do you need to do for it to actually, for example, tennis elbow, and you've been suffering for a little while, and then you should just pause, or should you seek a professional like yourself? What should be the terms, kind of?
Definitely to address it.
Yeah.
That's the first thing, is to address it. Normally, tennis elbow, if addressed correctly, would take around about 5 to 6 weeks.
Okay. It's not
if not
too
more.
bad, yeah.
If not more. If it depends again on how you change the way that you play tennis. So, for example, I would always suggest reducing the time you play tennis, not necessarily to stop, but implement exercises, stretching, warming up, warm down, and also try to change the way that you play tennis. Maybe seek advice with regards to the stringing, the racket setup, in terms
technique,
of exactly technique from a professional coach. So seek advice in all spheres.
Yeah. No, I see a lot of like players, and I'm sure you do too, like that, they have these kind of elbow braces, and they're everywhere. Usually older men that hit the ball a bit like like this, and it's a short swing, and it looks like they're so tense, which is generally an advice you shouldn't do. You shouldn't grip a racket too tight. Maybe it shouldn't be too loose, but not too tight for sure. Does those elbow braces help? And is this not a situation where you should actually like have a program for it and not just trust this device on your arm?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the body has been designed to take care of itself.
Yeah.
And if you use an elbow brace, ensure that somebody who knows what they're talking about has instructed you to do so, first and foremost. So some people just take the matters into their own hands, which is why I spoke about making sure that Wikipedia isn't your first port of call.
Yeah.
And they self-diagnose and then self-implement a device, such as an elbow brace. And initially, it might feel good. It might feel that the problem is being solved, but really, it's a plaster over a gaping wound.
Yeah.
And it really needs to be looked at professionally.
Yeah. And you're kind of masking the pain. And I see that, like, you know, I talk to pro players, I talk to recreational players. Some like, oh, I use painkillers for every match. I mean, I just had a call with a professional tennis player. Several of them take painkillers, which is not a good way to approach it, I would assume. But also, I think players use these creams, and we talked about that last time a little bit. That, you know, these heat creams is something you shouldn't really go to as the first
Port of call, no.
No.
And we gave the example of when we see the footballers that we all love, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, back in his day, and of course Lionel Messi at present. When they get injured, you never see anybody running on and putting a hot water bottle or Tiger Balm or deep heat onto the leg or wherever they're injured. They always come first and put ice. So that's always, again, a little nugget that if you do have an injury, first put ice.
Yeah, it's number one. And I try to use kind of after a training session, like I this weekend I had two hour something tennis sessions, and then we did, like, you know, ice bath, sauna, ice bath, sauna, ice bath, sauna. Is that something you'd recommend? I mean, people generally might not have the option to go to an ice bath, but you can ice your if you have any kind of pain, you know. You see tennis players also go into these cryotherapy tanks or just lay in a, you know, bathtub full of ice.
Absolutely. Intense. Not a pleasant experience all the time, but essential.
Yeah.
For rehabilitation, for rejuvenation of the body.
Yeah.
It's brilliant technique. Contrast bathing, brilliant.
Yeah, I love it. I also feel like super relaxed afterwards. So like I'm very averse to cold water. Like I don't even like a cold shower. So the first time I did ice bath was like, oh, this is, you know, it's like a nightmare. But then, like, when you learn the breathing, like the kind of deep Wim Hof style breathing, it doesn't, like, now I do longer ice baths than the guys who've been doing it for years. You know, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna deal with this now. You get over the fear. Sauna is not as much of a problem. It's pretty, you know, sweating. We've all done that. We live in Malta, so we know what that is. But then the ice bath can be quite a sharp experience, but can gradually, you know, get 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then you get into it. Obviously, you should be a bit careful not to do like a half an hour and then die in there.
I think you're right. It needs to be incremental, gradual, especially with the ice. You don't want to plunge directly in whole body. Like the heart can be shocked. So and then it's
no. It's exactly. That's a very good point. Yeah. I guess it's with everything, right? You don't want to shock and surprise your body. You want your body to gradually get used to something, right? Always.
Yeah.
Shock is not always good, or generally not good. Are there any other types of therapy? Like when you approach, I mean, I really liked when working with you is that you seem to always identify where the root cause is. And that's something I really appreciate. I've been going to many, you know, therapists, physiotherapists, a few osteopaths, and I really found that you're the one who's really solving the problem at the root, which is the main thing you should do. But you need some real skills for that. You need to really understand the whole thing. How do you really approach when you get a patient? What's like the key things you think about when you have a new client that you need to kind of investigate? How do you see that communication?
So the first thing that I focus on when I have a new patient is the case history. The case history is the patient's story in written form, at least for my eyes. So that's essential. Getting that completely and well done allows you to avoid many pitfalls that you wouldn't necessarily be able to avoid if you were going in the dark. So that's the first thing that
like an interview kind of,
with questions, and it allows the patient to talk. And you can get so much information by allowing individuals to talk. So that's most probably the key feature of my practice that I like to maintain is allowing the patient to talk and listening more than talking.
Yeah, that's always important. Yeah.
The next thing I most probably, which is also very important, is to realize that the patient knows about the situation, and I need to listen, like just hear what they're saying. So as they then describe their symptoms, then I am able to work with the information that I'm given to start to develop a picture, and then start to put the pieces together to the puzzle.
Yeah.
So it's very important. Case history taking, essential.
It's kind of a, two-way dialogue, right? I mean, it's a dialogue you have to, for you to help them, they need to provide good information. Let's say I come in and I lie about my injury, or say it's not so bad when it's really bad, or maybe exaggerate the injury. You're not going to have enough or the right information to actually help address the problem. So it has to be, I guess, two-way in that way, and where you can slot into my issue. That's where you have to come in. And that's I really appreciated with you, is that you seem to have a great understanding of where I'm coming from, and with my injuries, or when it's starting. Because something I noticed, and I think that's probably what you've seen as well, it's like, okay, if I have problems with the wrist, then I might have problems with the forearm, and then the problem travels, it travels maybe up to a shoulder, and then maybe it started at the neck, or it comes to the neck at some point. Do you see that a lot, where the injuries kind of have, like, travels around your body a bit, or at least from the arm up to the neck?
Very much so. They link a lot. The body is a unit, and although it's comprised of different parts, these parts all function together in order to allow us to do the activities that we want to do. So, if you have a wrist injury, it will impact the fingers, it will impact the elbow, it will impact your shoulder, which then all these areas have to compensate for an injured wrist. So they are all affected. And then it impacts the neck, it impacts the way that you turn your head in order to, before you'd be able to just put your hand where you want to and get whatever you want. But now you have to adapt. So yeah, it's very, very often, especially if it's not addressed, it moves up slowly to other regions of the body.
Yeah. So if you just ignore it, it's gonna, obviously with everything, like if you ignore a problem, it kind of swells, like it's like a bun in the oven, it's like swelling like a dough of bread, and that's where you have to. I've tried over the years to address things as quickly as I can, even if it seems like you're in hypochondriac at times, like you're okay, what is this, or I have this problem, should I be worried, or should I take any action? It's worth the small kind of monetary investment or time investment, because you have a peace of mind, right? That's always been my approach, that okay, I have a peace of mind, I know I need to do these things before I play tennis, like get there on time, do a 5-10 minute warm up, instead of just going out and trying to bash balls, which like most club level players do. I don't know if it's the same in squash, because you have to warm up the ball, so maybe you warm up there.
No, I think it's in any sport. It's the same, as you said. Many people like to focus on their strengths, because they look good when they're hitting the ball very cleanly with the forehand. We always want to, or seemingly want to, exhibit our positive side. But that's actually really contrary to wisdom. Really, you want to focus on the area that is your weakest, that often opponents target. And when you're under stress, physically, mentally, those are the areas that capitulate and break down first.
Yeah.
So it's best to warm up the areas that you actually very uncomfortable doing to avoid injury.
Yeah. And that's a good point. Like, so let's say you have a stroke, like in the tennis, you have the backhand, maybe you're generally late there, and you're hitting the ball a little bit off center. That's maybe the kind of stroke you should warm up first. Like, or for example, I see a lot of players, they dive into playing points or a set. And, one of the key things in tennis where I see a lot of players and myself get some injuries or have maybe some niggles is the serve, right? The motion of the serve. You want to hit it as hard as you can. You are in control because you have the ball, you can throw it up. So you don't have anyone actually putting you off center. You can actually put in as much force as you want. And then people don't warm up, and then, injuries will come. Like, and I see from what I see, a lot of players have like problems related to the serve, like with injuries.
Yep, zero to hero.
Yeah, zero to hero. Yeah.
In serves, you really it's from again almost static to high intensity dynamic movements. And so this is where, of course, you have to be very aware.
Yeah.
Very aware.
The warm-up thing, you should obviously do a small jog, or like in tennis you can do a few footwork exercises, but is there also some stretching? Like, what should it be? Static stretching? People talk about dynamic stretching. What is preferred, really?
So this is was a contentious point for a while, but now many people are looking at dynamic stretching, dynamic warm-up is the preferred way of doing things now. And not saying that static stretching is
bad
or isn't worth doing, but definitely dynamic. So basically prepare the body for the activity that you want to do, which is very important.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of tennis players now. They do this kind of fitness training with. There's one called Douglas. He's in Miami. He does these like running on the beach with a racket. They look absolutely ridiculous, and he has like sometimes resistance bands holding them like this, and they have to do air swinging around barefoot on a beach, which is not a bad space to be for exercise, but it makes them look fools, But it's they are training the motions that they will perform on a tennis court. So it seems like that is the most logical and natural way of kind of approaching this, right? So,
yes.
So I like that kind of approach that they, like going to the gym and doing bench press as much as you can. It's not going to be the best way to improve your tennis, right? So
exactly.
Do you see people like overtrain at gyms and get injured? Does that ever happen?
Oh yes, for definite. Overtraining occurs wherever you have in life. I think most of the time people do training which isn't necessarily beneficial on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
So you'd have somebody pushing, I had a gentleman who pushed a leg press 160 kilograms.
Ugh, that's a lot.
And I thought, well, for what purpose was that? And it so happened to be to impress his friends.
Yeah.
So
friends or girls, yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily beneficial. So a lot of the time, I try to just get people at least to rethink or have a look at why they're doing something. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
What's your intention? What's your idea? What are you trying to achieve? If you can understand what a patient's expectations are, then you can help to balance those expectations against reality.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah, it's true. And one thing I thought about, like I used to go, before I became clever, I used to not go maybe so much to physiotherapy or to an osteopath like you, who kind of finds the root. I used to go to massages like every month, Do they help? Like, is there a purpose to go like to a deep tissue massage, or is that kind of semi-efficient?
Deep tissue massage and massage in general, there is always a benefit to some degree of physical touch.
Yeah.
We are human beings that benefit from physical touch, tactile by nature. But again, it depends on what it is that you think is the purpose of the massage and what you think is being achieved. The reality is very different from what you may think is the case.
Yeah,
so sometimes people, it's an injury which requires specific focused work.
Yeah.
But then they go to a generic masseuse, masseur, and that doesn't help, especially if the masseuse or masseur is not trained in the sport, let alone the anatomy and physiology, which the level that's needed to actually make a difference.
It's not really like you shouldn't go for massages when you're injured. I mean, that should be pretty logical, because it's more, I mean, I've treated it more like a kind of, if you are feeling some slight stiffness in the back, that can help, like relieve some of that. Generally it will come back, but then at least, you got some relief, and it's also kind of a nice relaxation. So it's partly that, but to see it as something that will treat an injury is probably not so wise, right? You need to address each injury kind of, I guess, individually, right?
And you have to accept that one of the things, you have to accept that you are injured.
Yeah. Which is tough. Yeah, most people don't want to
It's
accept
not
that.
just that, I need my back rubbed. I have to accept that something I've done in the sport that I love has caused an injury. Maybe it's my negligence to address it when it should have been addressed. But that's the first thing, is acceptance. It's an injury. It needs to be treated as such,
Yeah.
not just rubbed in a spa parlor. No.
Does it help to rest? And where does rest come into this treatment?
Rest is important, at least to rethink why something happened. But just complete sedentary rest without doing anything is also, again, an extreme. And you never want to be at extremes. You always want to be balanced.
Yeah.
So not forget it, play through it, going to keep playing every week. That's not good. That's an extreme. And then also the other end of the spectrum, which is just completely doing nothing, sitting on a couch with some digestive biscuits and a cup of tea.
No,
Equally not good.
Heal anything. No, I think you really need, the way I've tried to approach it now is to, you have an injury, let's say you have some problems with the knee or something, then like strengthening the body around the knee is generally a good idea, so actually your support system. Am I approaching it correctly, or should I,
Yes.
eat more biscuits?
No. Approaching it that way is the best way. To sometimes and often, it's not necessarily the area that's the problem where the pain is. Often it's other areas which have been neglected,
Yeah.
which then result in an area dysfunctioning.
Yeah.
So it's always good to look at the peripheral regions above and below the area that's affected.
Yeah, that's good. No, it's something because when I did suffer a bit from tennis elbow, I used this flex bar, this kind of like tool that you bend, and it trains the forearms or the muscles around there and the wrists, but it doesn't seem to really relieve that, because some of the tension is there, and then you're strengthening that part, so it just seemed to work. Although it's not like probably a blanket solution, but it has like at least something better than doing nothing, and trying to use it. And what's the difference, golfers and tennis elbow? Like, what's the difference and why?
So the difference between golfers and tennis elbow is the locations of the inflammation.
Okay.
So golfer's elbow is on the inside of the arm. When your palm is facing the ceiling, it's on the inside of the elbow.
So here.
Yes. And tennis elbow is on the outside of the
And it's based on the movement, like the golf swing being quite different. I mean, not super different, but it's more like this. Last time you said something interesting about tennis elbow coming kind of a lot from the backhand swing. Like that's a very common contributor to tennis elbow because of this.
Yes. So the backhand swing, again, going from the middle of the body to outside, often it's your body trying to prevent the breaking of the wrist, the flexing of the wrist. So the muscles that are involved in extending the wrist are located and insert into the outside of your elbow. So when you hit a ball backhand, the ball's trying to bend, and the racket's trying to bend your wrist.
Yeah.
And your extensor
Not
muscles.
a very natural. No.
And your extensor muscles are trying to do the opposite, to keep the wrist straight. So that's why they get overstrained and they get inflamed, especially with repetitive movements.
Yeah.
And of course the contrary for the swing of a golfer.
Yeah. And I'm also noticing that some players that use quite extreme grips and then tries to kind of like maneuvers the wrist in a strange way that at least it doesn't seem 100% logical way, that they more easily get like maybe wrist injury. I mean, it depending a little bit on how much flow you have in your stroke, right? Would I be right in thinking so?
Yes. So as you said, the way the technique is very important. The more the wrist moves, the more anything moves, to be honest, is whether that's an engine or the physical being is prone to injuries.
Yeah.
So that's why stability is the best when you're hitting a stroke. And that's, really ideally in squash, you shouldn't be moving. You should reach the point and then swing through. Exactly. Yeah. Stabilize the whole body, then swing through.
Yeah.
Accidents happen when you're not really prepared for a shot.
Yeah. You're
and
off
rushing.
balance. Yeah, you're rushing, and you're not ergonomically well placed. I think that it's the same in tennis. Like something I noticed, and you learn it the hard way, is that the better you move on the tennis court, the more time you have on each stroke, and also the easier it is to kind of create a proper stroke, right? Because otherwise, if you're like running and you're arming a lot, you're kind of losing balance, you're gonna miss hit. But when you have like that solid foundation, you're bending your knees, you're in place, it's so much easier to play. And that's what the pros do much better than the happy amateurs, is that they are always in the correct place. So that then their stroke comes more naturally than for us who maybe has to muscle it a little bit more or stuff like that.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot, Amos. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I think we should order some food now and talk about other stuff. But I hope you like listening to this. And if you're in Malta and you need help for an injury, this is the guy, Amos Simon. He has helped me a lot, and I will keep seeking his help when I get injured, because I guess it's a question of time, turning 40 in 3 weeks. So, yeah, thanks, Amos.
Pleasure.